Okay, it's about time for the last session before the lunch break. I hope everybody is hungry enough, wide awake. I hope you are. So welcome on stage, Leon Oltmans and Patrick Jenkner, both from Leuchtfeuer. And you're going to talk about data visualization beyond reports using Google Looker Studio. Is that about right?
That's correct, I'd say so.
Like always, please everybody pay attention to what questions you have in mind and you throw all your questions to those two afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Eki, for introducing us. My name is Leon, that's my colleague Patrick, and the topic has been already told to by Eki. First of all, for the start of the talk, I'd like to talk to you about the agenda, what you're going to expect and in this talk, and what topics we are actually going to cover. At first, we're going to do a bit more introduction. I'm going to talk about the use case for this talk, also about Looker Studio, what is Mautic Reports, combining data, shadow database, what, how, and why, technical limitation, next steps, and a short and comprehensive conclusion. So if you have questions, please note them down and ask them at the end. So, who are we? My name is Leon. I'm working as a marketing automation expert at Leuchtfeuer Digital Marketing, the agency with the hard-to-pronounce name. I've been working there since about 2018, so I've been with Mautic since about that time. And if you have not seen my face, you might have heard my voice, because I'm also the co-host and the second voice of the English version of the Mauticast.
And my name is Patrick. I'm a second-year trainee in data analysis, also at Leuchtfeuer. I've been a part of the Mautic community ever since, so for about 1.5 years, And I spent my time with lots of nerdy topics around Mautic, so for example, automated testing, CI/CD workflows, and deployments.
We are also 50% of the Red Hat population of Leuchtfeuer, so we're very pleased to welcome you to this talk. So, let's talk about the use case. The use case for today's talk is a German perfume brand called Schuback. They have about 40 plus stores in the north of Germany, in-person stores. I think it's 43 or 45, but I'm not 100% sure. And yeah, like a lot of brands with COVID, they had to rethink their strategy about how to sell their products, because with COVID, all their stores closed down, so their online demand has just skyrocketed. And they used Mautic mainly for newsletter and other sorts of online promotion. And they have a custom integration with their shop system that mostly pushed data from Mautic, from their shop system to the Mautic, and built segments on customer behavior and customer purchase information. That's roughly the use case for today's talk. And also the key issues why we even came up with the project and why we even came up with this talk. They did KPI reporting, but that was very, very tedious for them. They had to be done partly manual. They had no real connection between the Mautic data and the shop data. Both data had to be pulled manually every time they wanted a new report, which obviously took a lot of time. And it was very prone to errors because they did a mistake pushing or pulling the shop data, so they had to do it 2 or 3 times when things just went bad. And also it was very hard to digest, so instead of looking something like this, easy to understand, and with some nice graphic, it was, I'd say, more close to looking like that. And if you're a marketeer looking at KPI reportings and this is what you're offering, it's just not easy to understand and really hard to digest. So, you now may ask yourself,
why do we not just use Mautic reports? Because after all, Mautic already has a reporting feature. The built-in reports of Mautic are really useful. With just a couple of clicks, you can create graphs and tables for example, the number of pages over a certain time. And it is really nice to use when it is applicable. But it can be deceptively difficult to use because, for example, there are a total of 24 different data sources that you need to choose for your report, and not all of them can be understood at a glance. What's the difference between form and form submissions, between emails and email sent? All of them have loads of different data points, and so for a non-technical person, for a Mautic user, it can be really difficult to get started with Mautic reports. Also, they are quite limited. when you can use a Mautic report, it's good to use one, but there are a lot of use cases when you can't really use one. For example, you can show the most visited pages of all time, but you can't show the most visited pages over the last month from last year or something like that, which is a typical use case that Mautic doesn't offer. Also, you are very limited in using Mautic reports for comparisons. There are some reports that offer comparisons, but comparing a graph to a different graph over the previous month or something like that can't really be easily done with Mautic reports. And, of course, most importantly, you cannot use third-party data because it's a Mautic report, so combining data from a shop and a Mautic cannot be done with just Mautic reports. So we needed to use another tool.
And as you already mentioned, we used Google Looker Studio for this project. And you may ask yourself, why did we even choose Google Looker Studio? First of all, one of I say main parts is that we had some pre-existing knowledge in the company already, because we use Google Looker Studio in other SEO projects. So there was some predisposition to just have a tool that is not basically learned from scratch, but some knowledge in the company already. Also, it's free and pretty accessible. Collaborative work inside of our company was super easy. We could just send the link of the Looker Studio to the SEO guy if he had any questions. We could send them to the designer in-house and let him do the design for it, for example. So it wasn't, it was rather easy, I'd say, instead of tedious work. And also, iterative work is very easy with it because we could just send the customer a copy of our Looker Studio, because the customer in this case was very technical, so they could just drag and drop all the charts or the KPI blocks in the method that they wanted it, and then could send it back to us. So we cut out the part where we would have like tedious meetings or long email conversations about design. We just sent them that, they sent us back, and we implemented it. Also, we have real-time and automatic data updates. As soon as you open a Looker Studio, it fetches the newest data, and we could use data blending. So we had two data sources, Mautic data and their shop data, and we could blend them into single charts without having any issues, because it's a basic feature that Looker Studio offers. So the baseline, it's, I'd say, rather easy to use instead of having to learn a tool from scratch that is super complicated. You can do complicated things with Looker Studio, but the base usage is rather easy to get. So let's take a first glance. I've talked about Looker Studio for a minute now. I want to show you a couple of parts of the dashboard that we provided for the customer. Every single number you see in this report has been changed, so there's no real data from the customer, obviously, but we're very thankful that we could even name them. The first feature I want to show you and explain to you are selectors. Selectors is a pre-configure, I'd say, option to display data. For example, as you can see here, the email type or the date range. Both very important. The email type in this selector would show the segment, campaign emails, or the option to display all email data. Because if we look at our newsletter performance, for example, we want to filter out all the campaign emails, like double opt-in emails or onboarding emails, because these have a very high open rate, and they would screw over with the total rates, because they're much higher than our newsletter numbers. And also, things like date filters, date selectors, work pretty much out of the box as long as your data set, for example, email stats, table entry, has a date. We can just use it and tell Google Looker Studio, take a look, and if we select a month and the date is in that month, it will get shown, and if not, it will just let out. The second one is an email KPI block, which pretty much looks like this. It's just baseline email KPIs, email sent, open rates, unsubscribe rates. It's pretty compact information. It shows trends depending on the date range set, which also pretty cool vanilla feature that Looker Studio offers. So like, for example, below the email sent, you see a, green 10.9%, and that is compared to the date range we're actually looking at. We looked at, I'd say, the last month, and it will automatically compare the data from last month to the month prior and show you a trend, which is also a pretty cool feature, especially if you look at long date ranges. For example, the last year, you can compare it to the year before that, at least if you have the data still. And it also shows the numbers regarding the selected email type, as I mentioned before. segment emails are mostly much more important than the stats from the campaign emails. Last but not least, we take a look at data charts, which both of them are taken from the actual dashboard. They show correlation between data sets. For example, the lower one shows the average value of an order and compared it to the total money invoiced. So we have a comparison, okay, we have that many products sold and the average price of a product was this. Also, it's a very good tool to just show trends over time. So let's take a look at the finished dashboard, or let's see, I think this was about 50–60% into the whole project, so a lot of the details changed, a lot of the design changed still. But if we just take a minute and take a look at the email KPI block on the left and the email-related charts on top, and just leave out the sale data, you can take a look at that and then compare it to the email stats report you get from Mautic. This is without even taking a look at third-party data. This is just Mautic data, but displayed very nicely. If you have this in comparison to a dashboard like this, it's very, I think, easy to understand why the customer even asked for this project, because it's just easier to understand the data. But I've just talked about Mautic vanilla data. The real key to success is when we start to combine the data with third-party or shop data, whatever. I want to talk about 3 things here, which really came in handy in this project. The first one is the enhanced attribution. So we can track which email led to conversations or which email campaigns led to conversations in the shop. In this example, using UTM parameters, nothing too crazy here, but this data that we have partly in Mautic, partly in the shop, and we use this dashboard to combine them. So we could answer the question, email X had performed Y or had performance Y and generated Z amount of revenue. This is a question as a marketer which you should be able to answer, and thankfully to this dashboard we were able to provide the customer with a dashboard that could answer those questions. And was also pretty cool, if you're doing A/B tests, you could basically also check which of the A/B tests did the better Mautic site performance from email KPIs, but also which of the both tests sold more in the end. Second one is better return of investment analysis. We could correlate marketing investments with the revenue to see the potential for optimizations. So basically to answer the questions or state amount X was spent on email marketing and generated Y value. And last but not least, we could use it to have a better customer journey mapping to understand how customers move from engaging with marketing content to finally making a purchase. So basically answering the questions, if we have number of leads X and they receive marketing efforts Y, they took step Z before the final purchase. So basically all the steps that they take, as long as we have the data, the GDPR has to be taken into account here, because if we cannot track a contact, of course we cannot get their data, neither from the Mautic site if they visit pages or from the shop site, unless they make a purchase. So now let's talk about a real example from our use case which we used, which is combining data from emails and the shop. You might think this is a bit overloaded first, but we will split it into smaller pieces of information. The first one is the left side, which is just email KPIs from Mautic, from the email IDs, the email name, subject, send date, mail sent, and read rate, for example. And on the right side, we have the actual sales that were directly connected to this email and also the revenue that was created from this specific email. We did that using UTM parameters. Also, on top, we have 2 selectors. The first one, date range, is nothing fancy, but the second one, email ID, let us track, or let the customer track in this case, which emails exactly did which revenue, and also filter for email campaigns. If they had like 4 email campaigns regarding Christmas, or send out 8 emails regarding Black Friday, we could even see the performance. And if we compare those to the older IDs from last year, we could even see trends which performed better, and gave the customer the option to just look for individual emails or a set of individual emails they wanted to compare. So, conclusion, combining data in a single chart like this offers a pretty holistic view of the information that is usually contained in 2 separate data silos, for example, the shop and Mautic. But there's one more thing we have to keep in mind. I already teased it a bit, but
Yeah. Since we are at Mauticon Europe, we need to talk about the four-lettered elephant in the room, which is, of course, the GDPR. Data protection is important in Europe, especially in marketing. Mautic stores personal data, like an email address, name, addresses, and so on of our clients' leads. And Looker Studio is an external service, so we cannot just give Looker Studio access to Mautic's database, because then we would be sharing personal data with an outside provider. So what's the solution to this? A so-called shadow database. Basically, we take Mautic's database and take the tables that we need and anonymize them. So for example, in this case, we have the leads table, which contains all people in Mautic, basically, and the emails table, which in this case stores every email that has ever been sent, with the subject of the email, the date it was sent, and the email address that is what it was sent to. So the data to be anonymized, in this case, is the name and the email address. Everything else we can keep. So we take those data points that need to be anonymized and hash them. This basically just means we take the email address and turn it into a seemingly incomprehensible array of letters and numbers, which can't be traced back to the original email address. Ergo, it's anonymized. And then we give Looker Studio access to just this anonymized database. The important thing is that these anonymized records can still be matched, because if we have an email address in the leads table and an email address in the emails table, both of those get hashed to the same hash. So we don't know what the email address was, but we know that it's the same, and we can still match that. That is not that important in Mautic, because Mautic also has IDs, which it uses to map records internally. But this is really important once we bring in the shop database, because in our shop database, we also have a table of our customers with the name, the customer ID, their email address, and so on. And if we anonymize the data in the shop database, it will also get the same hashes as it did in the Mautic database. So even after anonymizing, we can still match records from Mautic and from the shop. Now, there are some technical limitations to this whole setup. First of all, since we need to transfer all of our data to a different database, we regularly need to transfer big tables, which we can't do a lot because it would take a lot of time. So we can't have a real-time view in Looker Studio, because usually we would bring over our data like once a day maybe, and we need to wait for the new data to be transferred to our shadow database. Also, the setup uses the default tables of Mautic, which are not optimized for analytical queries to be run on them. They are optimized to be used for Mautic. So some queries, so finding out some real niche or real complicated array of options, can take quite a lot of time, which means that you need to wait for a long time when loading a dashboard. But this can be mitigated by using something called aggregation. Basically, if you know that there's some data point, some analysis that you need often, then you can run that query in the night when you don't need your Looker Studio. It will do that for you. It doesn't really matter how long it takes. It will be there for you in the morning once you want to look at it. And last but not least, we have introduced a setup with just Mautic and a shop, but you could, of course, also add more sources, like a CRM, Google Analytics, or something like that. And once you add more and more data sources, you get more and more data points, more and more tables, and all of those need to be connected in some way, which gets exponentially more difficult the more data points you add. So what would be a logical next step for this whole setup? It would be using something called a data warehouse, which in very, very simple terms is just a data structure that is optimized for storing lots and lots of data from different sources over a long period of time. So we could, for example, take the data from Mautic, but also from our shop system, a customer relationship management system, our Google Analytics, and find a way to integrate all of that into a data warehouse where we store it for a long time. We can look back at 5 years ago, for example, and run analytical queries over all of that data, because a data warehouse is optimized for analytical queries. One example for that would be Google BigQuery, but there are, of course, also other options.
Thank you so much. And now we will get to the final part, the conclusion after this talk. First of all, I'd say KPI dashboards just enhance Mautic reporting without even taking third-party data into account yet. Just the possibilities how to display Mautic's data using an external tool like Looker Studio instead of just a Mautic report gives a very, very easy access to the data. It gives access that you usually cannot even get through the reports because they are not customizable enough. We can compare data, which Mautic doesn't offer as a vanilla feature yet. But when we add things like third-party data from the shop, and combining those data sources into comprehensive, easy-to-digest report, it gets very, very powerful. And also, we have to add, we used Looker Studio for this setup because, like I said, pre-existing knowledge, it's free and pretty entry-friendly, but there are some even open-source alternatives like, I think, Metabase, Tableau, Redash, Grafana. So if there is some use case you have, but Looker Studio is not the option for you, there are other options that you could consider. Then I'd say, thank you for listening, thank you for your time, and if you have questions, please ask them now.
Thank you very much. Might there be any questions?
Just a very simple one. How can we use it?
You as Ivy or you?
Yeah, or you us as the community.
I mean, you can use it to enhance the reports, but there is no open documentation on how we did it yet, if that's what you
Is
want.
there any specific code that people need to use it?
No. It's basically all we did was connect the Looker Studio to the Shadow database, and then we wrote queries for the results that we wanted to show the customer. But for example, the email KPI block is just aggregated data from emails that there's no real code besides some MySQL queries.
So basically, I would have to connect a SQL database or MySQL database to Looker Studio.
Well, an anonymized version of it, yeah.
Okay, got it.
That's basically how you give access from Looker Studio to the database.
So, question from my side. Sounds to me like this shadow database is the hardest part of it all, or
Yeah.
at least the non-common one.
I'd say so. So, I mean, if you're getting into more complex queries because you have 4 data sources connected, those queries can be quite tricky. But the hardest part in setting up is just how do I give Looker Studio my data without giving Looker Studio my data?
Okay. More questions, please.
Thank you. Nice presentation. I learned a lot. Our customers always want like a unified experience. Can you do that with Looker Studio?
Define unified experience.
Like, for example, one credentials to log in everything, like SSO?
We don't even have a process to have login into Looker Studio. It's just a report that you can create and then give a secret link to your customer.
Okay.
So in this case, we didn't even think about how we could implement it or is there a logging process because there just wasn't one.
I thought that you mentioned that the customer can log in and move some charts around.
Yeah, and for that example, we just took a working copy and gave that to the customer via link, and they could just adjust their charts, move around what they wanted, and then said, okay, we are done, and we could look at the copy that we made from our working dashboard.
Right, thank you.
So it's a Google service and you need a Google account that has the right to access that, right?
Yeah.
What else? Everybody's still digesting?
If there is space, so the Shadow database is a different MySQL database.
Yeah, we did that.
And how do you process the data from the Mautic database to the Shadow one? Is there like
in that case, because we did it very simple, CSV export, just export Mautic data, hash it in the process, send it somewhere, and then import it again. But you can do it a lot smarter, I'd say.
Wow, okay. And you have some cron job that runs that every day?
Yeah, so it just takes the delta of the data that wasn't already put and just takes all it doesn't transfer every table completely, but just new data and change data.
That's smart.
Thank you. The power is the combining data to combine the shop, the CRM or the shopping data and the amount. And when I look into the combining data, there are more KPIs I have, and the KPIs says me these are the 3 top customers. I want to give him a voucher or something else. How is the way from the combined data back to a system? How can I reach the customer again with a GDPR in back?
Oh, that's a tough question because we only use Looker Studio. Yeah, that's a good question. We only use Looker Studio to display the data, but we haven't thought about any way back.
Okay, because you are anonymizing, it's only one way. And
Exactly.
Using pseudonymization,
That would.
can reverse, but it's not GDPR. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but technically you are pseudonymize, you know what, right?
Yeah.
So you're not really anonymizing, but pseudonymizing.
Yeah.
So there is a way back. It's just not the purpose of the tool, is it?
Exactly. It wasn't. There would be ways to do it, but it just wasn't in this case.
Like a data clean room in the marketing field, a way back to this. Okay.
But thank you for the question.
Okay, then I have another tough one for you.
Okay, prepared.
In the end, we're talking about filling a gap that Mautic doesn't, that Mautic opens.
No.
Could you envision anything that Mautic could do to support, to either improve their own capabilities, but maybe that's beyond Mautic to display shop data, or anything that Mautic could improve to better support such use cases?
I'd say supporting third-party data is rather a niche use case, but having improved Mautic reports, for example, being able to filter for dates in email sent, comparisons is just like features that for data displaying tools like Looker Studio are very, very vanilla and common, but are lacking in Mautic. So if we have more features that are closer to, I'd say, standards, then we wouldn't need to have all the hustle with having a shadow database, sending our data somewhere, so we just have a third-party tool to look at it. I'd say the key would be to improve Mautic reporting. But I've heard it is a hard task.
Yeah, I think the Mautic is more on the customer side instead of a Matomo, and it goes too deep, and I like more the Mautic way but I think there are not so much data inside it.
For some use cases, Mautic reports are really good, but for more advanced use case comparisons, they just lack the features. Yeah.
Can you do a quick follow-up for? Yeah, I'm still trying to envision a situation where it's really easy for everybody to set up a nice reporting. And if you have a Looker Studio, whatever the UI is, and you go to Matomo or other sources, that's already fine, and there are adapters, and it's all anonymous data, and others, it's not. So would you envision, and I totally understand that there's no way to let a tool like Looker Studio access the Mautic database. Would you envision a world where we have a closed shop, like a self-hosted tool, so it's not a problem that it has access to the Mautic data? Or would you envision the ideal world where the shadow database and maybe even the historical data being in that shadow copy provided by Mautic? Or do you think big data, big queries, way to go, CDP or wherever the data is in a central place? What is the way to go for Mautic?
I think from the nature of Mautic, storing big amounts of data for a long time just doesn't fit well with performance, sadly. So if you have a reporting tool and have the options to look at long spans of time, for example, the last 3 to 4 or 5 years, those data just cannot be stored in Mautic. Like the Mautic database just wasn't made for that. So I think even when we are having a better reporting in Mautic, we would still need some kind of connection to the data, because we cannot store them a large amount of data in Mautic directly. We would have to store them anywhere else. So either we somehow change Mautic so it could store a lot of data and then have a better reporting on that data, or just stick to third-party tooling, like Looker Studio, for example, or others. But I think the main takeaway is the more data you have, the better your analysis and reporting is, but the less likely it is that it's just vanilla Mautic.
I've been thinking a lot about reporting for the last couple of years in Mautic, and I love Looker Studio as well. I use it a lot for basically everything else.
Yeah.
And I also had some students actually building a prototype on how to improve the reporting in Mautic.
Oh.
So, but it's just a UI, it's just a prototype. It's nothing technical behind it, and the effort to implement that would be huge. It would be like a big community project, I guess.
Yeah.
But what you mentioned, some open source tools that are out there. Did you have a look at them? Is there maybe a way that we can like leverage the existing reporting open source tools to build them into Mautic somehow?
Sure, but that would need someone who understands the reporting tool, like an open source reporting tool. Then we would have to choose as a community which tool we would like to implement. Then we would need devs to just implement that feature. But I don't think it would be cool if we would have the resources for that in the community, but I don't think it's the main priority currently. So if I had free resources and could just allocate them, I would love to have better reporting tool or external reporting tool integrated into Mautic and just stick it into UI and make it work with Mautic database and everything. But I'm not thinking that it's realistic for the next 1 or 2 years, at least.
Might it be a good first step to try and come up with a working solution with, for instance, Metabase as the UI, with either a shadow database like you do, or Unomi, or something as a storage where the stream can be sent and forgot about,
Yeah.
to have a setup that everybody can use and replicate and maybe even seamlessly integrate with Mautic without making it part of Mautic, because that's the next level.
That wasn't really a question, was it?
Yes or no
You basically
question.
answered your question. Yes.
Maybe how can we decide which one is the best from the open source ones as a community? Well, that would be maybe the question you're asking now. Like, which we have to decide on one of the open source alternatives as a community. I don't know. Do we like a forum post, or can we decide it tomorrow in the discussion, or so, I don't know how we would come up there.
This sounds like a topic of a lunch, but but I think, like always in open source, whoever decides to spend some energy into this is the one to make the decision. So if I'm in love with Metabase and I want to spend some days in coming up with a framework like that, then that's what it's going to be. If it's going to be an official like initiative by the Mautic project, then we're going to go more formal way and then whatever, come up with proposals and partnerships or whatever. But I'm with you. I don't see that as a priority at this point. Would be just good to have a nice solution set up that people can copy and be happy with, and not reinvent the wheel all the time. Okay, we have a little bit of time left. Do we have more questions left? If not, then I thank you very much again. That was very insightful, and I hope that food is already there. If not, just let's continue the discussion, and then see you later in this room. Thank you.